Okay, welcome back to another question being answered. This question is, how do you make baked tomatoes, what they call Provencal style in France? Of course, you can refer to them any way you want after you see how they're made, but this is a very traditional process and formula called tomato Provencal. First, you start out with medium-sized tomato because this item is normally used as a side veg. And if you get a big tomato, you got a big side veg. That's probably too big because typically any vegetable that's served with dinner is usually one of 2 or 3 vegetables that are served. So you want the right size. Now, I'm going to use a bread knife to cut these tomatoes to make sure that they're cut nice and cleanly through, but also because I need to make them flat, okay, so that they lay flat. And you want to cut these tomatoes nice and even so that they lay flat like this here on the sheet pan. So I got a little bit of baking paper here, and we throw a little bit of oil on that. And we set our tomatoes on there. See, that's just the right size for a little additional vegetable for dinner. Let's make that one flat. And we're going to make 6. I think your recipe calls for 4. And I'm making a little bit more because we're all hungry here on this set where we're making this, and we all want to have a little tomato today. Now, the breadcrumb and Parmesan cheese mixture that goes on top of this, my recipe calls for 4 tablespoons of each, which means equal parts. So depending on how many tomatoes you're making, you make equal parts of the Parmesan cheese and breadcrumb mixture. But before you do that, we take a little bit of fresh basil and salt and pepper and oil or butter and put it on the tomatoes. So we're going to put a little bit of oil on the tomatoes. This is some nice extra virgin olive oil. Now this tomato here is not flat enough for me. So I'm going to make it just a little bit flatter so it sits evenly like that. All right. Now we're going to take our basil, which is fresh picked, and chop it for the tomatoes. Now you can make this recipe without the basil if you want. You could substitute dill if you wanted, or not use any fresh herb whatsoever. But I would recommend the basil. It tends to be the counterpart herb for tomatoes. So we're going to put first some salt and pepper on the tomatoes. This is certainly one of the most important parts of making this dish, is to make sure the thing is seasoned properly. Nice fresh ground black pepper, which of course we grind in our coffee mill. We take whole peppercorns and put them in a coffee mill. That makes it a lot easier. All right, there we got some salt and pepper. Now we'll take our fresh basil and put directly on the tomato like that. You don't want to put too much, but you don't want to put too little. This whole fresh basil tomato combination flavor is going to be slightly diluted, if you will, by the mixture that we're about to make that's going to go on top. Now I have about a half a cup, which is a little bit more than the recipe, about double, of breadcrumbs, and about the same of Parmesan cheese that I'm adding to it. So this is 50-50 Parmesan cheese and breadcrumbs, okay? Now we're going to take some parsley, add that to it, and we're going to take some melted butter and add that to it, and we're going to take a little bit of fresh chopped garlic and add that to it, and I'm going to put our other glove on. The reason I wore these gloves is because when you're doing something like this, I have to take time to wash my hands, and I don't want to do that. I can just rip the gloves off and throw them away when I'm done. Now, these are nice latex gloves, and of course, the food service market, and those of you at home who like to wear gloves when they're cooking and so on, can buy vinyl or latex. I like them both. So we're going to add a little bit more butter, because one of the things we want to do, and a little bit more parsley, and a little bit more garlic here. One of the things we want to do is we want to make, for those of you from up north who know what I mean when I say good packing snowballs, we want to make good packing breadcrumb and Parmesan cheese mixture, which means we want to be able, it's got to be able to stick together a little bit. You see how that's starting to stick together? Not sticking together quite enough for me. I'm going to add a little bit more butter to it. We'll give it a mix. And at this point, we have to taste this. I'm going to throw some more parsley in there because I want it a little greener. Now we're going to give this a taste before we dispose of the gloves, and we know we don't have to come in here and mix this anymore. This is good just the way it is. The question is it good packing enough? I'd say it's almost, I'm going to put just a pinch more butter in. There we go. Alrighty. Now we're going to take each one of the tomatoes right over the bowl. And we're going to pack some of this mixture onto the tomato. But being sure that we cover the entire top of the tomato. And you just kind of trim it off the edge like that when you're done. Now some people would go like this and really mound this stuff on here. I don't think that's necessary. Remember, this is designed to accent the flavor of the tomato basil underneath and not to overwhelm it completely. But I must tell you, this garlic breadcrumb Parmesan cheese mixture is very good. It's the kind of thing that you could pack on the top of a pork chop when you bake it, and it's good there. Or you can put this on a lamb rack and roast it if you wanted. This is a nice little mixture. Oh, it's not trimmed off enough over there. There we go. You want them nice and neat and clean looking, and that's how they'll look eventually on a dinner plate. I would almost say that you could eat these without even cooking them if you wanted to, but they're better cooked. Okay, and we got them all covered with our snow, if you will. And now we'll dispose of these gloves. And we got nice clean hands underneath. I like that. Now, I'm going to put these in an oven and bake them about 350 degrees. So let's assume for a minute that I want to pre-prepare these for dinner at the house. I have people coming over for dinner. Or I'm feeding my family on a Tuesday night. Whatever the case might be. If you want to pre-prepare the tomatoes, we're going to bake them so that they're only 3/4 of the way cooked. Now these tomatoes, you don't want them to get soft and then runny. They're very easy to cross over the line of cooking these too much because it's a soft vegetable the way it is, this tomato. And overcooking it even a little bit will make it mushy, if you will, and then it's kind of ruined. So still edible, but not as good as it could have been, and that's the important thing. So I'm going to pop these in the oven at 350 at a high temperature for a short period of time. I may go 375, 400, depending on the size of your oven and how many tomatoes you're cooking at the time. So we're going to go 400 degrees on these tomatoes because I want to pre-prepare them so that when it's time to actually serve the tomatoes, all I have to do is pop them in the oven, and in the time that it takes to warm them up, it finishes the cooking process. So we're going to cook them about 3/4 of the way, which isn't very long, at 400 degrees, okay? Now, if I was going to serve these at the same time that I'm baking, your recipe calls for 350. That makes a little bit more sense to me, okay? Give them a little more time to brown, but we still need to cook the tomato a little bit. And remember, you don't need to cook the tomato too much. This tomato is edible just the way it is. The only exception to that rule would be is if you had tomatoes that weren't really ripe, which I don't recommend, but can happen from time to time, and you wanted to cover them up with the breadcrumbs and make them taste like something that they wouldn't normally taste like. This is the kind of preparation that you can do to a tomato like that and have it come out nice. So I'm going to throw these in the oven at 400 degrees. And we are going to time elapse this for probably about 15 minutes, give or take. And I'll tell you the exact time that these took when we come back. So I'll see you in about 10 or 15 minutes right now. Okay, about 15.
Remember you said I'll tell you the exact time. Or whatever.
Okay. Completing the tomatoes the exact time I told you I would tell you. Turns out to be about 15 minutes at 400 degrees, okay? And let me show you what we got right now because they're coming out now. Now look at those, aren't they pretty? Still got some texture left to the tomato. Now you have a little texture left to the tomato itself, plus the crust has some texture, and that's what makes this dish so good too. So we're just going to pick these. They're all done. There's nothing left to do to these. They're ready to serve just like that, and they are as tasty as they get. Look at that. That's how crusty the crust is. You see how I picked that up? Come on down there, Richard. Look at how crusty that is. You see that? Oh, that popped right off of there. It's stuck together. It's so crusty. That's nice. And you want that little crispiness on the top of the tomato. This is a nice vegetable, and it's easy to serve if you're plating a meal. If you're plating a meal and you want to put maybe 2 vegetables on the plate, like this is a great item to serve with roasted meats and grilled meats and things like that because it's got that hearty food that can stand up to those big foods, you know. This is not something that you might necessarily serve with a piece of poached salmon. And you could, but it wouldn't be my first choice for that reason. You know, the dish would end up seeming like tomatoes Provencal garnished with salmon because this is so much bigger than like a poached salmon might be. So there you have it. This is tomato Provencal. This is a very nice, as you saw, a very simple item. It's as vegetarian as it gets, and if you want to reduce the fat content a little bit in this, which you may want to, you just add a little bit of lettuce butter. Just because I like them to be really good packing before I put them on there doesn't mean you have to do it that way. It can be looser and still come out very good by using less butter or less Parmesan cheese, and maybe 1/3 Parmesan cheese and 2/3 breadcrumb is another way in which you can cut the fat down in this. Enjoy the tomato Provencal. If you make this item, I guarantee you're really going to like it. Have fun with it.